elementary school in this part of Louisiana. I say was because last year the local school board voted to shut down that elementary school at the end of this school year. They voted to shut it down because that elementary school, look what it's right next to. It sits about a quarter-mile away from a big petrochemical plant, one that the federal government said was putting people in the surrounding community at an unacceptable risk of cancer. There's an 80-mile stretch along the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans that has earned the terrible nickname Cancer Alley. It's earned that name because of more than 200 petrochemical facilities along that stretch of river, where the EPA has repeatedly found that residents are exposed to more than 10 times the level of health risk from hazardous air pollutants than people living elsewhere in the state. That's according to a report from Human Rights Watch. When Joe Biden was president, the Justice Department and the EPA decided they were going to take some action there. The Biden-era Justice Department and the EPA brought a landmark lawsuit against that big petrochemical plant, that one that's just down the road from that elementary school. It's called the Denka Performance Elastomer Plant. They make neoprene. In its lawsuit, the Biden administration alleged that the Denka facility was releasing unsafe levels of a toxic carcinogenic chemical called chloroprene into the air. They said in the lawsuit, quote, the increased cancer risk that the communities near the facility are currently being exposed to because of Denka's chloroprene emissions presents an imminent and substantial endangerment to public health and welfare. In the aggregate, the thousands of people breathing this air are incurring a significantly higher cancer risk than would be typically allowed. They are being exposed to a much greater cancer risk from Denka's air pollution than the majority of U.S. residents face. That action was taken under the last president, Joe Biden. Now, new president, radically different story. Donald Trump's Justice Department has just announced that they are dropping the lawsuit against that chemical plant. And they say they are dropping it because DEI. Huh? Seriously, they said that dropping this case, quote, fulfills President Trump's day one executive order ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing. Because it's mostly black people who live nearby? Is that what you're saying? My colleague Alex Wagner traveled to Southeast Louisiana this week to see the plant, to meet the people who live nearby. I should say before I show you this next part that it is impossible for anyone to know what exactly caused any particular illness in this community, but what you're about to see reflects how things feel in the community of that plant. You'll also hear references to another chemical company, DuPont. That's because this facility used to be owned by DuPont.
How many of you feel like you know people, either in your family or your circle of friends, who are suffering adverse health effects because of the proximity of this plant? So everybody.
Yeah. My dad and I have experienced several generations of illnesses. My mother died of breast cancer. My sister was diagnosed with breast cancer, and my grandmother died of breast cancer. Wow. And my fraternal grandmother died of pulmonary disease. And so on and so on, other family members, ovarian cancer. So we are directly affected in this community. I've also had genetic testing for breast cancer, my mother, my sister, and myself, and all of them came back negative.
Wow, so it's not
a DNA, correct. It's environmental.
Wow.
I have several family members that have died and passed away of cancer. Some of them still living. One of my family members, she's on the list for heart transplant, two of them. One family member on the west bank of the river from Lucy in Edgard. He just had his lungs. He had a lung transplant about a year ago. My mother, she passed away. A lot of people are going to dialysis centers. A lot of people have brain cancer, been high. Prostate cancer is high throughout the parish, not just on the west bank of the river. Chloroprene is in the whole parish.
I grew up on East 30th Street. I've lost everyone in my family because of it, and I'm the oldest living relative on my father's side at the age of 67 due to DuPont Denka.
Wow. You've lost everyone in your family.
Everybody. I remember growing up on East 30th Street, and you remember the days we could sleep with our windows open? Well, a lot of mornings we woke up with this awful smell in the house. We didn't know what it was. Oh, it was just a release from DuPont. We didn't know what chemical we were breathing while we were sleeping. It was in the bedsheet. It was in your closet, in the clothes in the closet. My mom couldn't get it out the house if she aired the house out all day long. We smelled that all day long. We went to school with it on our uniforms.
Is it all cancers?
Cancers.
Everyone.
Yes.
MSNBC has reached out to Denka for comment. We've not heard back. Denka did say in a statement published by the Washington Post that the dismissal of this lawsuit represents a long overdue and appropriate end to a case lacking scientific and legal merit from the start. The company said it, quote, remains committed to reducing chloroprene emissions at the plant. But for members of that community, that kind of promise, as you might imagine, just isn't nearly enough.
The 5-parish area that's called Cancer Alley, it is now 92% black.
Wow.
And it's got about 250 petrochemical plants in that one little 80-mile area of that river, the river between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. That's called Cancer Alley.
And what do you think is going to happen under Trump with the Denka plant and all these other, industrial plants in your neighborhood?
Well, I don't know. That's going to depend largely on the people here.
Yeah.
If we let them have their way, they will kill us all. We will die here. We are now trying to regroup so we can find out exactly how we have to deal with this situation. What is obvious to us is the destruction. The government has now officially abandoned us, has officially thrown us to the wolves.
Yeah.
That's what they've done.
Joining us now is Alex Wagner. Alex, this is incredible reporting, and this is an amazing trip. Thanks for being here to talk about it.
Thank you for airing it, Rachel. I think so much of what Trump is doing right now, they're betting on the abstract, right? They're betting that shutting down the Environmental Justice Department of the EPA doesn't alarm people. We don't think about the human cost of all that. And I've covered a lot of stories in the field, Rachel. This was one of the hardest I've ever borne witness to. I mean, this is a community of people who have borne they have borne tragedy like I think almost no one else. A lot of these people, one of the men I talked to, he grew up on a former plantation. These are the children of sharecroppers, and those sharecroppers were the children of slaves. A lot of these plants, Rachel, most of them, in fact, in the area, are on the grounds of former plantations. There's nowhere else in Louisiana that has that stretch of land. And it's been cleared to make way for plants that the Biden administration believed was poisoning the community. And I just, for a moment, thought deeply about not the irony, but the symmetry of what were, former institutions that visited trauma upon communities of color, and these plants that are now reportedly, and again, according to the EPA under Joe Biden, visiting a different kind of trauma to the current population of reserve Louisiana. I want to play a little bit of sound where we talked about that, if I could, that legacy
please.
Of slavery to petrochemical industries.
I'm so struck by the fact that the Denka DuPont plant is on the grounds of a former plantation. What does that tell you as people of color in this country?
We meant nothing then, and we mean nothing now.
I think Trump is doing exactly what Trump said he was going to do. And I don't think we have enough money here for him to care about what's going on with us. He cares about the wealthy people, the people that paid, the people that were elected to these positions that he put in place. And if there was some way that we could make money off environmental justice for him, he would prioritize it. They do not care. It's about what they can make money off of. And they can't make money off of this.
And DEI has nothing to do with the facts and the fact that this company, Denka, was actually breaking the law. Mm-hmm. They are guilty of breaking the Clean Air Act. They put us in jeopardy. We are burying family members every week. People are suffering 20 and 30 years before they pass. That's real. That's real. We live a life every day wondering what's going to happen at our next doctor's visit.
Alex, can I just ask you, Alex, that when you're talking to these folks, did they see this coming from Trump? Obviously, this lawsuit was filed. The plant was on a very different trajectory under Joe Biden with that previous DOJ and EPA case. Did they see this coming? Did they have time to prepare for it? It seems like they're starting to talk to you about what they're going to try to do to organize in response.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, they have been grappling with this for decades. And they have been going to local and state officials and federal officials, even under Obama and early Biden. They felt like their cries weren't being heard, that there was not a level of concern that matched the threat they were facing. And so when Michael Regan, who is the EPA head under Biden, who is also black, came down and met with Robert Taylor, the older gentleman that you saw in that earlier clip, and said, we're going to do something about this, I think they reluctantly believed him, right? They finally felt like, okay, we've reached a threshold at which they can't ignore this anymore. At the same time, you know, I think you can talk to many people of color in this country who don't take any advancement for granted. And so I don't think there was, and from the conversations I had, a ton of surprise that Trump was going to reverse it. But at the same time, Rachel, there is a tenacity and a resilience in this community. I mean, Robert Taylor, the man that we just talked about, is 84 years old. He picked me up in his red pickup truck and he drove me all around the town. The police came after us at one point. They are unafraid of the consequences here because they got nothing to lose. They admitted on this panel, they're like, most of us won't live to see this, the conclusion of all of this. But they're fighting for the next generation and they're not giving up.
Wow. Incredibly important reporting, amazing and absolutely horrifying story. Alex Wagner, God bless you, my friend. I really appreciate you doing this.
God bless you for doing this,
and bringing
Rachel.
it here. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Alex.